All right, I'm getting the recording and the stream going on YouTube. Let me go and send a link to the YouTube stream in your GD72 channel, and we'll get started.
What are we covering today, Quinn?
Today, we're going to be looking at VFX, so visual effects. I know your class is pretty artist heavy. Is anyone interested in visual effects? Yeah. In the industry? Cool. So we'll talk a little bit about VFX. We'll look at some cool demos Unity has available, and then we'll go and make some stuff ourselves. Yes, that is the plan. Okay, so putting a link to the YouTube stream in your GD72 channel right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I get a lot of questions about visual effects. It's funny, we've had a few classes like in the past that were very visual effects heavy, and then just like an absolute like desert in terms of interest. Kind of goes up and down. Chris is actually looking to fill like a VFX contract right now and can't find any students that want to do it, which is kind of unfortunate. But I'm glad some people here are interested in it because it's pretty cool stuff. The best place I kind of recommend looking for sort of further reading in visual effects, and I'll link to this in your GD72 chat as well. There's a site called realtimevfx.com.
Hey, Quinn.
Yeah.
What do you mean he's trying to fill a contract?
Basically, a studio reached out and they're like, hey, we want someone to work on our game for 3 months doing VFX. Do you know anyone? And we don't.
Often does that happen here?
Which? Not being able to find someone or studios reaching out?
Studio calls.
Pretty frequently. Yeah.
But
Not being able to find someone? Not very often. Normally we have people that can apply.
in the foundation course, we had like 5 or 6 people that wanted visual effects in the
Yeah.
beginning, and then by the end of learning it, we all didn't want it. No one liked it.
So in Foundation, what were you doing for visual effects?
we were just in the Adobe After Effects, and we were just making different types of. Oh, we were just doing everything.
Okay, so that's actually interesting, bringing that up, After Effects. So VFX, the full pipeline for creating a lot of really complex stuff, depending on what you're doing, doesn't necessarily start in the engine. So a lot of effects where you'll see things like smoke and fire and liquid kind of animated in VFX often start in other pieces of software. So After Effects is used for a lot of simulation stuff. The big one is Houdini. So side effects, Houdini. This software is used for all sorts of procedurally generated things, but it's used a lot for visual effects. So they have all these simulations where if you want to create like a fireball, rather than try to draw a sprite sheet or just do it with a shader, you can basically create an explosion in Houdini. You can bake that out into a sprite sheet. Then you can go and play that sprite sheet in Engine and kind of tune it how you want to get it working for your visual effects. Another popular one is stuff like EmberGen, I believe it's called. Yes, they specialize in basically just smoke and explosions. That's what they have for games here. So yeah, you can basically export stuff like this, the data in either 2D or 3D into your engine and go and play that back as part of your visual effects. You can see here, these are actually really good examples. I like these. They have a lot of stuff going on. So when you look at it, it's not just like one effect they're showing, especially this one right here. They have like a shockwave, there's sparks that are landing on the ground, there's fire, there's smoke, it kind of fades out over time. There's a lot of stuff layered together. That's a really important part of creating good visual effects. A lot of really good visual effects will also have animation and other stuff, audio, some post-processing that can all be applied at the same time.
A question for this.
Yes.
So in this case, which this contract for After Effects, are they asking you to just implement them from what they exist, or do they want you to make them scratch?
I'm not entirely sure. I know the studio that's asking, I think mostly works on 2D stuff, but I'm not sure exactly what part of the pipeline they want the person for.
In most cases, in most studios, they just use what exists already.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's basically working with whatever software they have, like Houdini and that kind of pipeline, producing stuff and then getting it in engine.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see on real-time VFX here. They have a whole mix of stuff. Some of it is like tutorials. Some of it is people showing stuff off. You'll see a lot of sketchbooks where people are sort of experimenting with things. And then some are just people asking questions. And you'll find a mix of primarily Unity and Unreal stuff in here. You might find the occasional thing done in like Blender or Maya or something like that, but primarily it's for Unity and Unreal. Is this animated? Nope, that's not animated. Oh, gross. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Curious how that's done. I've seen some cool effects like this where they're actually doing this as a post effect rather than like visual effects in the scene. That's pretty great. Oh, they move away from the character. That's great. That's super cool.
Why wouldn't you kick him out?
That's pretty cool. You see that looks like my bathroom?
As a joke, yes.
I hope that's a joke. Okay, here's some cool stuff. So I really like breaking these down. Does anyone know any of the YouTube hotkeys? Some of them are really useful.
Use coma on period and you go perma.
Yes. So I hit spacebar to pause, or the stupid ads. And yes, if you hit the comma and period or the greater than and less than keys, you can actually step through one frame at a time. Sorry?
Link for that video.
I can send it to you. One sec. You can step through. Now, the quality here is not great. If we actually open it in YouTube, we might be able to play it at better quality.
Yeah, it looks grody.
There we go. Yeah, 360p. Thank you, YouTube. Yeah, we can step through and see this frame by frame, everything that's going on. So you can see there's a lot of stuff happening here. If we actually start from the very beginning, well, you might be starting all the nice glowy stuff. The first thing that actually happens is, I think the rocks start moving a little bit. Oh no, but the glow happens, then the rocks start lifting up. We can see it's focused on the character, but spreads out over time. Doing sort of a point cloud effect. Then also some lights kick in. So they've got this synced up with a light in the scene as well that's hitting the ground. You got the animation in place too, so they're kind of layering all this stuff together. Let's actually see it all at the same time. Spinning around, that's pretty cool. So I really like looking at a lot of different games for stuff like this. Things like Elden Ring has some cool attack stuff. No commentary. Go to a random spot in Elden Ring. So even like simple attacks, this guy's, I don't know, riding a horse down the stairs or something.
Like that's all the jokes.
Yeah, isn't that, yeah, it's
It's a mountain goat?
looks like it's somewhere in between.
It's an ancestor.
But here, stuff like this. So you can see not only do you have visual effects going, this system is actually interacting with the water.
Hold enough, Adam. Go play the game. Go play Barbies, Adam.
So we can see even like a swing from the boss like this layers together. This video is way too long to make scrubbing practical. But we've got rocks being thrown around, water splashing, there's smoke being thrown around, and then we have that shockwave hitting the water as well. That's assuming we listen to another one I really like to look at because it has some cool effects is, let's see, Overwatch, horror gameplay.
Sergio.
Is that the new character that looks like the dude from Moana with like gun arms? Yeah.
Sergio's our classmate.
Oh.
Yeah, very nice.
Who is the new character in Overwatch? Alga?
You touch, okay? You touch.
Okay, so I really like. Oh wait, I want to see the perspective from far. Here we go.
There's still VFX on the.
Oh yeah, there is, but I like showing off. So Overwatch is interesting in that they have that kind of weird pseudo-realistic but still kind of cartoony style. So if you look at a lot of explosions and everything, like the rocket coming out here, it's actually, the explosion is very cartoony looking.
Boom.
I think there's a helix in the rocket. It's got like
Yeah, on the trail as well, yeah. Looks like it's sort of like a tube that's following the rocket. When it explodes, see, it's got a couple effects. It starts off with this kind of like circle spreading out and some sparks. And this effect right here, I can guarantee is probably a sprite sheet they're playing that expands and gets bigger. And then they have more of like a fireball looking thing in the center.
It totally looks like it. Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah. And so they kind of combine a lot of these sort of like cartoony anime style looking explosions and effects with the rest of their game. Yeah, I definitely recommend if you're interested in this stuff, going through real-time VFX. There's a lot of cool stuff on here, and a lot of people also kind of talk briefly about how they do their VFX. That was kind of underwhelming. Okay. Yeah, here's some cool stuff like a black hole. Now, a lot of these as well probably don't just use the visual effects systems in the engines. In Unreal 5, you're going to be using Niagara. In Unity, we use the visual effect graph. They're often also using custom shaders and materials to go along with this stuff. So it's sort of like a whole blend of different things put together. Those are pretty cool. That was pretty elaborate. I like that one. That was cool. Wow. What we're going to do to get started today is we're going to fire up our Unity project. We're going to take a look at some of the sample content that they give us for visual effects in Unity. The visual effect graph that we're going to be using comes with a couple built-in things, but they also give us the sample pack that gives us a look at how to do like a burning fire effect, a lightning bolt effect, a few different things. We can basically just drag them, drop into a scene, and test them out. Just to keep things kind of isolated, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make a new scene. We're going to dump all of our VFX stuff into. So inside Unity, I'm going to hit Control-N, and I'm going to make a new scene from our neutral light setup template scene here. So that's Control-N and select the neutral light setup. And I'll snip this stuff and put it in Discord as I go. So we're selecting the neutral light setup template, going create. Yeah, we get a simple scene with some stuff in it here.
I didn't follow you.
Which template do you select?
The light.
Oh, am I on? Just a second. I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong project. Slightly newer version. Sorry. One sec. Let me move back again. I'll redo that. Sorry about that. Here we go. I'm going to recreate my scene here. There we go. And I'm going to save this. So I'll hit Control S and I'll save it inside my scenes folder. And I'm going to call it VFX Playground. Okay, so to get the sample content for visual effects and see what Unity's got to give us, we're going to go to the window menu up top and go down to the package manager. From there, we're going to scroll down until we find the visual effect graph section. In here, there's a few different tabs we can look at. We're going to go to the samples section, and we're going to import this visual effect graph additions. We're just going to click on import right here and let that import. If you're curious, there's also the button up top that says Open VFX Graph Samples project on GitHub. If you want to dive more into this stuff, you can actually clone that project and open it up. And they have some really fancy visual effect stuff they're showing off there. Yeah.
For all these packages, is
Yeah.
there a way to pick that up?
You can basically go and add them. So all the Unity ones you'll find in the list here. The stuff that is listed under my name or other things here, those packages you can basically go and add just through URL. If you click on them, you'll actually see the... Actually, maybe it doesn't show it. Oh, it does show it right here. But if you go and clone this entire project and open it up at home, it automatically adds all these packages.
For future Unity projects that open, it will also happen.
So for future projects, if you make new stuff, you have to add them kind of one at a time. Unity's been promising for quite a while. They're going to add like a menu that'll pop up when you make a new project, and you'll just like turn off the stuff you want. Yeah, but it's been literally like a couple years, so
That seems so easy.
yeah, you figure it'd be one of those things that, oh yeah, of course we should ship this feature with this thing.
They just laid off a bunch of people.
Yeah, but yeah, we're still waiting for that. So
Because you
it's sort of a double-edged sword for projects with Unity. They don't want to make assumptions about the stuff that you want in your project. So they kind of carve out as much as possible and let you add it sort of one piece at a time afterwards. But when you kind of want everything, it's sort of annoying. The flip side is something like Unreal, where they sort of give you everything right off the bat, but you end up with very large projects with huge install sizes. I just updated Unreal 5 for the new build next term, and it's like 60 gigs the install size for Unreal 5. It's huge. And the sample projects they give you are another 50 gigs per. Yeah, they're huge.
I was trying to make our blast stories at home, and apparently we don't have visual scripting as a basic thing.
Oh, when you make a new project, that should be added already. Like, you can see that down here.
It wasn't. I had to go into
Oh.
the package and find a way to add it back in.
That's odd.
It is
Okay.
in the package thing, but I
Yeah,
didn't know how
yeah,
to do
wasn't installed.
Wait, how
Odd.
do you not even have the universal render pipeline as default thing in mind?
Yeah, you have to go to window and then.
Oh, so that depends on the template you create. So if you want to make sure you have URP when you make a new project, you have to go new project and then go down to either core or sample and make sure you select the URP or the HDRP version you want.
Wait, what's HED?
So HDRP, that's the high definition render pipeline. That's what we're working in right now.
And then like there's something about like collab, like SCM.
Oh yeah, that's their source control stuff. Yeah.
It's a different version of Unity.
No, it's just it's like an alternative to Git. So there used to be a product called Collab that they had that a lot of people liked. Unity deprecated it because they bought another company called Plastic that does version control. They have actually it's a really good version control system from what I've seen. That's similar to Git, but a little bit more kind of artist and user friendly. But we don't teach it here because no one in the industry uses it. And I've actually talked to people at Unity themselves, and they don't use it either. So it's just one of those things where if no studios are using it yet, it doesn't really have any value to teach to students.
So if you get that error, what do you do? Because it just keeps.
You might have to install the... there's a specific package for it. I forget what it's called. Let's see. Might just be called Unity Version Control or something like that. Yeah, it might be this one that you're missing. Okay, so we have our samples added. I also did click on the The link here to open up the samples project on GitHub you can take a look at. They have some cool demo stuff you can import. So they've got things like portals. They do this goo effect. They've got like a burning effect and some holograms they do. Oh yeah, this one's really cool. There's a lot of crazy stuff you can do with visual effect graph. Yeah. One interesting one they do that I don't like a lot is this one right here. They're showing off like grass rendering, which is not a great thing to do just through visual effect graph. I've tried it myself, but it ends up really annoying to like author and actually paint where you want grass. Unity has some proper terrain tools for rendering grass outside of this. Yeah, there's kind of like limitless options for these types of effects. Once we have the samples added to our project, we can close the package manager, and you're going to see a folder inside your project now called samples. Inside of it will be visual effect graph and then the version, and then inside that, this additions folder. What we're going to do to try some of this out, so we're just going to go into the prefabs folder and we can drag some of this into our seed. Now, lightning's a little bit more complex. I'm going to do that last. Pretty simple. We can drag in like our smoke and our bonfire and our sparks and see how they look. If you want to take any of these kind of template assets and use them for your team project and do some modifications, that's okay. One of the reasons I like to add these samples as well is we can use things like the flip books they have for fire and smoke and everything in our other particle systems. Now, these are fairly standalone in terms of how they work. If you click on them, you'll see that there is a component called a visual effect. This is sort of like a player, and it points at a template, which is kind of like a file that it's reading all the VFX data from. And we have a whole bunch of configurable options down here. So if you want to go nuts on it, like I can select the Spark VFX, and you can go crank the spawn rate up. We crank up the burst counts. And you can kind of mess around with what they do. They've got a lot of options exposed here. You can play around with how long the particles exist. I think probably even how much gravity affects them. Yeah. So when we create our own visual effects, we can kind of add our own stuff to our projects, then we can add lots of tunable values. We can go in and play around with things. If we're smart, we can kind of gear our visual effects towards using them for more than one thing. We have one type of explosion effect. We want one that looks slightly differently. We can put in different sprite sheets. We can change the color or the size. We can kind of reuse it in different places. One that's really interesting that is kind of customizable, even more so, is this lightning effect. So I'm going to drag that one into the scene. So the lightning effect is really cool in that it actually interacts with objects in the scene. So if you open up the lightning effect once you drag it into your scene, you'll see all these objects here that say lightning P0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through 7. What the lightning effect does is it actually arcs through those positions. So if you want to create like a chain lightning type spell or effect in your game, you can actually move all those transforms onto enemies or targets and then play the effect, and the lightning will arc through all those points. So if I want to make this go and arc out more, position 0, I'll grab one in the middle. P3 I'll put all the way over here, and I'll play it again. And it does that. So we can actually load information from our scene into our visual effects to change how they work in basically real time.
Thank you.
I think that might have cool. Another thing we can do if you want to play around with it is, depending on how the VFX are set up, you can even sometimes get away with just scaling them up to make them bigger. Yeah, there we go. Well, it starts to look a little bit weird. We can take a look at how we can scale our own effects. You can go in and start playing with all these sorts of values to get different effects out of them. You can crank up the radius. Oh, that's cool. This is on the bonfire. Increase the radius. Yeah. Now, one thing I want to point out that I really don't want to see anyone doing for Team Project is there is an old school particle system that Unity has, just literally called the particle system. If you right click and go to, I forget where it is now. Oh yeah, if you right click and go effects and see this thing, particle system, this is the old Unity particle system. It's pretty awful to work with. It has far fewer features than VFX Graph does. It doesn't work with post-processing out of the box. You have to create custom shaders to work with it just to get bloom. It's really not a very good system. It's been outdated for like a few years now, but I still see students finding like VFX tutorials from like 2013 and doing them for some reason. I guarantee you, whatever you want to do in the particle system, you can do better looking and faster in Visual Effect Graph if you learn the tool. So I don't want to see anyone using this old particle system. It's just going to kind of lead you into a bunch of trouble. To create our own visual effects, what we're going to do is inside our hierarchy, we're going to right click. We're going to go down to Visual Effects and select Visual Effect. That's just going to make a new game object with a visual effect component on it. Now, you notice we can move it around, but it's not actually playing anything. The reason for that is we have the visual effect component added, which is like the player, but the actual thing that describes the visual effects we're going to be using is in this template here, which we haven't created yet. So the second step to creating visual effects is after we create the visual effect game object, we have to create this asset template. What we're going to do is we're going to click on the new button beside asset template here in the inspector. So click on that new button there. And in order to keep things organized, I'm going to make a new folder inside assets. We'll create a couple different visual effects today. I'm going to make a new folder and just call it VFX. And the first one we're going to create here, really simple. Let's create a let's call this the, let's just call it the sun. We're going to make a star out of particles. Yeah. Once we save it, it's going to open up the visual effect graph window, which is going to look kind of familiar. It works a lot like shader graph does. We've got basically all the same controls. We've got a blackboard on the left-hand side where we can create different inputs to plug into our system. And in the center here, we have our actual graph. The one big difference between this and shader graph is rather than plugging into a bunch of output nodes, we create this vertical stack of stuff happening. We have here at the very start spawn that describes how we spawn each particle. We have an initialization section where we can kind of set initial values like lifetime, velocity, all that kind of stuff. We have update where if we want to go and add noise and turbulence or have them collide with things or trigger events when they die, we can do that there. And then finally, the output section describes how they're actually going to look finally when they're rendered. One of the really cool things about this system is if you want to create really complex VFX but have them all in one graph, you can actually have multiple systems like this. So when we get to creating things like fire, we can have like flames that will have sparks and smoke. We'll kind of layer them all side by side and have them all in the same graph. What we're looking at here is the beautiful default particle system. All it's doing right now is it spawns 16 particles per second. That's what that constant spawn rate means. After they're spawned, it's giving them a random velocity. It's giving them a random lifetime between 1 and 3. And then when it goes and outputs them, it's drawing a little plane for each particle. And you can see the mode here says face camera plane. So what's that is doing is as we move our camera around the VFX, you'll notice they always face our camera. Doesn't matter where we go, above, below, beside, those particles will always face our camera, which is how a lot of VFX works. Occasionally, you'll want to do something different with it, but a lot of the time, this is kind of the standard mode. To make them kind of fade in and out and look a little bit better, they're doing a size over life, so they actually grow and get bigger as they get older. And then they're doing a set color over life, so they actually fade out over time and disappear. Now, what I want you to do, and this seems kind of scary, but we're going to grab all this stuff and hit delete. And it's going to do nothing. So if you ever want to get back to what we had before, it actually has a few built-in kind of like standard templates you can start with. If we right-click and go to Create Node, kind of like shader graph, you can also just hit the space key. If you go down to System, it has all these example systems. So the one we had there was just the simple particle system. So I can just add that whole thing back again. This is all the same data. They have a few different examples here, so we can try out all of them. If we go system, that was the simple one. Empty just has absolutely nothing inside of it. Not very interesting. The simple heads and sparks and simple heads and trails look pretty cool. If we add those, you'll see how they work. So the simple heads and sparks actually kind of combines two different things together. It's spawning some particles that you'll notice they have a spawn, an initialize, and an update, but they don't have that final step, the output. So they're not actually drawing anything. These are essentially like invisible particles. And they go up and they basically just have a random velocity, so they're just floating into the air. From there, we can actually trigger events. So we can basically tell that particle to affect another particle. So from there, as these invisible particles move, we're then spawning all these trailing sparks that follow behind with some turbulence to create this kind of cool magic effect. Very similar to that, we can delete that whole one. That was these simple heads and sparks. If we go simple heads and trails, it's doing a similar type effect, except instead of spawning a bunch of individual little particles, it's actually spawning trails that follow behind that particle. And one thing you'll notice that Visual Effect Graph actually does really well is trails are pretty hard to render properly. You'll find in a lot of systems when you move like above them or at certain angles, since it's basically just a strip, like a bunch of quads put together in a row to make like a little strip for the trail. You can kind of find glancing angles where you don't see it, but Visual Effect Graph actually does a really good job always pointing those little quads towards the camera. So I can always see those trails. What else do we have in here? The simple ribbon. A little bit boring looking. Might actually be hard to see against this floor, but creates just sort of like an infinitely spiraling little ribbon effect. That one's not too exciting. The one we're primarily going to play with, we're going to add the simple swarm particle system. Now it looks like this. So this system, you'll notice the spawn rate. Remember our previous ones were like 16. This is at 25,000. So it's creating 25,000 particles per second.
Bro,
The crazy thing is that's not even a high count.
8,000 is not high.
No. The really cool thing about Visual Effect Graph is similar to the Niagara system in Unreal. They both run on your GPU. So they're using your video card to simulate this stuff. Video cards are really good at handling the same types of operations on a whole bunch of small things at the same time, which make them kind of perfectly suited to doing visual effects like this. So we'll crank this up in a minute, but we can hit really high particle counts, like in the realm of like a few million, with a pretty decent frame rate. So this one's spawning obviously a lot more over time. It's doing 25,000 in its rate. It's going and doing this arc sphere thing. So rather than just spawning from a single point, it's spawning on a sphere in the world. So we're basically just creating like a sphere of particles. It's giving them a lifetime of 1 to 3 seconds. And the reason why they don't look like a perfect sphere is because this turbulence node, we're doing an update. We can actually turn any of these nodes on and off just by doing this. If I turn off turbulence, they disappear. If I turn it back on, let's lower the intensity to something really low, like 0.01. And it does that. On in the update particle system in turbulence. Yeah.
Hey, Quinn,
Yeah.
do you think you can make these particles audio reactive? Say
Oh, yeah.
you
I've actually been looking into that really recently for a personal project I'm working on. Real-time systems that like analyze tracks to figure out the things like beats are pretty unreliable. What I'm investigating for it to make it a little bit easier to work with is FMOD, the audio middleware we're going to be doing for Team Project and Final Project, has some stuff in itself for beat analysis. And then you can send those beats from FMOD over into your C# script. And I'm going to try using that to affect visual effects. I'm actually doing pretty much exactly what you're talking about.
I'm also curious. When
Yeah.
do we learn FMOD next term?
We're going to primarily do it next term, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually time things. So your first milestone, we don't ask for any audio at all. Give you some time to kind of learn FMOD and get used to it before you're asked to use it for any of your actual submission stuff in Team Project.
Okay, I'm guessing there's a class for it.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. We'll be doing FMOD in both the scripting side in my Unity 2 classes, and we'll do a more like editor and audio design side lecture in Team Project.
Okay.
So I'm going to lower the intensity on this turbulence a little bit. I want it to still look kind of sun-like. Maybe like that. Try 0.05. Now, what's kind of cool about this is you can see the orientation on this system is a little bit different than the others. Remember the other ones had that face camera plane set up? This is using along velocity. So when you have particles that are moving at speed and you want them to basically look in the direction they're moving, this along velocity works really well. So we can see they're not actually facing the camera. They're actually pointing in the direction they're moving. Then they're going in and they want them to make them look a little bit kind of like thinner. So they're using this set scale X to basically thin them out. Now they're also setting the scale Y by speed. When I've got the turbulence set lower, you notice they stretch out more the faster they're moving. So when I've lowered my intensity down to 0.05, they get kind of squashed. I'm going to go in and make a couple small adjustments here. So it's speed range 0 to 0.4. I'm going to try... Yeah, there we go. Let's try 0 to 0.1. That looks a little bit better. If we want to thin them out a little bit more, we can even change this scale X to like 0.1. They get a little bit thinner. I like that.
I mean, thicker. It looks crazy when you make it thicker.
Oh, yeah?
Did like 3.
3?
Yeah, 3 on the thickness.
That's pretty cool. It's fuzzy.
Fuzzy covered. It literally looks like fur.
So I'm going to leave mine at 0.1 here, and I'll show you why. I'm going to go up to the top, and I want to do way more particles. So up near the top, we have a couple things we want to adjust. We have this constant spawn rate. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when I crank this up, there's actually a limit. So if I add maybe another 0, so I'm doing 250,000, you can notice there's like that initial burst, and then it sort of died down a little bit. And it definitely doesn't look like I have 10 times as many particles on here. The reason for that is we're producing now I'm at 250,000 per second. But if I look down, you'll notice this section here in the initialized particle, this capacity says 65,000. So that's sort of like a hard limit you'll hit with the number of particles you want to be creating. But we can actually increase that limit. The reason why this one's a little bit different, you'll notice that this rate has an input. So we can actually scale that in the inspector and let designers go in and mess around with it as much as we want. This capacity is kind of hard-coded. The reason for that is this system sort of like reserves memory for simulating the system. And if we have it set at 65,000, but we're only using 5 particles, it's going to use as much memory as 65,000. So we have to be kind of careful what we set the capacity to. We typically want to fine tune it so we're almost always at like 100% capacity to make sure we're like kind of being efficient and using as much memory as we're reserving. In my case, I want to crank up the number of particles a lot, so I'm going to change my capacity to, let's try 5,000,000. 5 million. And we get that effect.
So,
That's pretty cool.
I did 15 already. What the fuck?
build it.
And we can see what's our frame rate at here.
What the heck?
170, pretty good.
How do you do that?
If you want to open the debug stats, hit Control Backspace.
That is so helpful.
Yeah,
Control backspace.
yeah. Control Backspace opens up this display stats.
Oh.
The hotkeys are a little bit weird, so it's Control Backspace on keyboard. If you're on a controller and you press both sticks at the same time, it opens this up. There's actually like also a smaller FPS monitor. I've just sort of gotten used to it. So if you hit Control Backspace, Control Shift, Control Backspace, it opens it up like this. It's basically, while this is open, if you hit Control Shift, the right hand Control Shift, it cycles through different FPS modes up here as well.
Okay.
Does it have to be on a particular scene? Oh yeah.
No, it's any one of them. Yeah, sorry, yes, it has to be in the game scene. Yeah, you want to do this while you're running. So I opened up the FPS monitor here because I'm actually curious if I keep cranking up the numbers. So I'm getting 100 FPS at like 50 million particles. Let's see if I can crank this up. Sorry, that was 5 million. Let's try 50 million and see how I do. Wow, that's pretty bright.
Not a lot of frames.
At what? Ooh, that lowered it quite a bit. Yeah, okay, so we know our top end is between somewhere between 5 and 50 million.
Very big range.
Yeah. Let's try like 10 million. To edit your VFX. So yes, I just dragged mine off screen. But if you close it, there's two different ways of opening the VFX again. You can either go to wherever you saved it. So inside your visual effects folder, you can double click it. Normally what I do if I've got it in the scene, if we go back to the visual effect game object, you can double click the asset right here and it'll open it up. Or you can click on the edit button. You'll see at 10 million particles, my sun is pretty bright. Oh yeah, when I start to get my camera close, I can feel the frame rate start to go down. Cool. So it's already 1:53. I think we'll take a break when we. Oh, question?
Stuck on in the
Visual effect.
Okay, I'll come by in a second, help you out. So we'll take a break until 2:05. When we get back, we're gonna do a couple more simple graphs. We'll actually get into more editing things. We'll create some cool like magic trailing particles that'll follow behind the game object we're moving. And then we'll take a look at doing some kind of smoke and fire. We'll start again at 2:05.
howdy.
Hey.
Could I have something quickly?
Yeah, let me just give him a hand and then we'll come back. Stop your visual effect. You full screen it? Oh, hit shift space. There you go. Yeah, that full screen's any menu. Yeah. So even if you have like hierarchy, hit shift space, it'll give you like a gigantic. Yeah. So, I'm gonna use this talent to change the world.
Already changed, you know, part. I don't just put it in the no, it's not easy. That's good. Yeah.
Hopefully,
It's warning. Why is this thing? This is shit.
stealing from the villagers.
Look at that. Off.
So the way
Given the more that everyone's faster resistant.
Yeah, that's what I would like to rate everything.
Takes from them.
Last year, I stepped backwards.
No, okay.
I was in school and that. And I did. Good thing is I didn't log into any of my accounts on just computers because they had everyone's who did. They had their passwords. Logins.
So it's now it's time to log out.
No, well they changed the IT system. So it should be better now. But I mean, you can have your Google login. Just make sure your password is like something you don't use on other stuff.
I know.
Yeah, don't log in your bank.
Yeah.
I don't do it. Don't worry.
I mean, because IT people can see it too. Yeah, they can see your passwords.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Why would you?
So true. Okay.
This is also why I don't use dual Wi-Fi.
Is that why your desktops are so down bad? Oh yeah.
Damn.
I mean,
And then you got called out. That's crazy.
It's also
down sound effect done.
Even Griffin isn't 4%.
Oh, wait. That's so funny.
Fuck up. Please. No. Why is that so funny? I hate the fact that okay. Bro, that thing, that sound effect ignites part of my
I'll just use Fortnite battle.
I'm gonna keep saying, honestly, this is my true song. Keep singing it. Yeah, actually, then, Sticking out your gap. You're so skibidi.
I just wanna be your Sigma.
Sigma? Overwatch?
Sigma?
Sigma.
It's so sad, Steve.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Did I actually get it? I thought you liked it.
Sweet, you give me jobs.
Did I actually
Did you give me hand jobs?
Oh, no. I didn't know Lanterns was having
Relax.
Go play Overwatch.
Who's that?
He was
Dante should come to my boards with be mining friends.
I don't like money.
Damn.
I'm gonna build a tree.
You're gonna miss the treehouse Rex.
I can go on the tree house, but I won't mind it.
Dante, do you mind if I put my mine?
Hero shooter without counter.
Wouldn't it be funny if I put my Minecraft with the sex?
I'm kidding.
Unless.
Yeah, that makes my name in English. Like exótico is the house.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hold it.
Oh.
Grab the phone. Hold it.
Learning Spanish.
You're an artist.
Yeah.
Where do you
Wait, which part of it?
Where the artists from?
Vaquero.
Because they need a structure for the light to bounce.
Vaquero is
Or they don't have it, then it's not
You say it kind of quiet. You say it again?
Copper is
Vaquero
The first part?
Copper more like
No, vaquero would be.
Copper is the
Okay, so the first part.
Wait,
Like the first half. Where is cowboy.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What is
So can you go on? As it's right, can you go on?
But that's what it means, yeah.
Your guys think cyberpunk or sci-fi? Tell me all sci-fi.
honestly,
It's probably the rest of the problem.
What's the rhythm?
Demo chat.
Well,
Bullet out, red bullets. Oh shit. It's perfect.
Oh shit!
The spark system, just make collision on every spark.
got
I need chat.
Put it in chat based on
Shoot. Oh, I see it. I thought those were.
How does sand stop?
It's gonna get on.
What do you mean? You know they play Megalovania in the UBC.
Not surprised.
The orchestra, bro. They play the Halo team. They play the Celeste one.
Because it's the Megalovania is like,
I
It's
put
it was good, but it was also a massive.
It is one of the memes.
What I did.
If there is a meme, you can say that
counter someone wrong, Megalovania is pretty
You're
amazing.
counting up to the center.
Yeah, if you're counting on like one like meme song that everyone.
Bro, they had a video game like named like Theater Night. Nobody told me about it. And you know who was the guest? Celeste, Madeline from yes, Maddie from Celeste went there. And they did the Celeste like theme. I went to every single show there except that one. I went every single one except that one. I feel betrayed. Like I have a
Why do you have a whole thing there?
Because I want.
What happened to sharing your character?
Sharing is not fair.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's unhealthy.
Yes. So I keep
You're giving over yourself to be unhealthy.
Yeah. You're welcome. Are you gonna look for?
Are you
like the trees.
are you being greedy?
Yes. I wanna go look for them.
I'm basically mining for now, but I'm gonna go on this like adventure. I'm not gonna stop until like
The first one. The one on the right.
let's go opposite ways.
Hair color.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one's better.
I don't know
Because
where
I have a cord. And with a cowboy here, I will be an actual cowboy.
Yeah.
Me one Megalovania.
My inventory in Minecraft is
Okay.
more organized
Make your own.
than my real.
I should, but I don't know.
Bro, that's for final puzzle.
You don't know how to make the game?
But instead of blocks, it's spheres.
Nothing but balls.
Well, I should make one, yeah. Yeah, to be a cowboy. Not just a cowboy.
Got
They're all
So you should still more, right? You
you
should
look at
still
those.
more, right? There's like, that's
shit in
cowboy.
Unlimited balls.
It is not like
Unlimited.
Oh no.
That's my favorite character in the series. Yeah.
Wait, do you like Minecraft?
I used to like Minecraft. I played it when it was like still like a downloadable exe on like a forum post. It's changed a lot since then. And every time I play, I just feel so like lost and out of my element that I give up pretty quick.
Wait, did you play it when it was still owned by Notch?
Yeah.
Crazy. Me when Quinn was actually
Do you agree with the fact that it's so like big? Like, do you think it's kind of overhyped, or do you kind of get the reason behind why it's so big?
No, I get it. I mean, it's pretty smart. There's like gamified things in it, but it's more of a toy than a game, which lets you kind of play it forever.
Yeah, it is more like
Yeah.
You saw the new GTA, right? What's he saying?
Yeah.
I did. I haven't watched the full trailer. If you doesn't show any gameplay at all, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but Pokemon, so
I mean, the graphics look phenomenal. I'd be more interested in hearing what monetization they're
I
going to
thought
have.
it would like
that's all
like
along lines.
a little bit.
Yeah, but still, it's what people are
And I was fine with that.
Oh, you're gonna have to buy
they came in later.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I love that there was some gaming journals that was like,
Like,
it's like Rockstar still won't explain why they're not launching it on PC at the same time. It's like that's obvious. It's like they're going to sell it to you again.
but still.
Like, when they tell you
It's the
if
god.
they release both at the same time, you're going to buy one together. If they sell them a year apart, you're going to buy it on PC.
That happened
Yeah,
with
no, I don't like the guns in
Sorry?
that happened with Fox
because they go for the
Yeah, 5 came out.
oldest game.
Quite a bit later.
on PC.
Yeah,
I don't remember that happening. I guess
But you shoot someone in the head.
let me double check.
And they're like,
I'm pretty sure it did.
you can bring my monitor.
this is you on the literally.
Quinn, may I show you something before you start class?
Sure, give me 1 sec.
Come on, take 10 minutes break.
Actually, well,
What's up?
substance of
That sucks.
Yeah. You taught me how to play, so.
Rotating substance.
Wrap up.
Yes.
I didn't mean it.
Huh? I know what you mean.
Did you know what I said?
Yes.
As soon as you died,
Oh,
it
well, doesn't do it.
I know. I heard.
Oh.
And
I'm just
So I'm trying to rotate it because I'm trying to see the specular response. For oh yeah, it's not with the sun. So the biggest thing for metal sticks like that is you want to have
They wanted to build a house.
these values.
What if I just show you what
They let you break.
I'm going off some.
I'm building my own. Yeah, it's around like
I'm
25 blocks.
trying to pick the middle core section, which I don't really know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I assume it's supposed to be like some roughened up, tinted, like tinted. Yes. That's right.
That's not bad. It'd be cool to see some more bigger, like especially his sword will have like scratches and gouges and stuff on it. It looks very like Jeff likes to say like CG perfect.
Going to Connor's house.
I will say, for it being quote unquote dull, it's not that scratch.
Yeah, I mean that's also like you need to draw him 50 times.
True.
It's real.
Roll until he
It's real.
You fell.
I did fell.
If Mel did.
I done fell.
You done
I done fall.
You done fall.
I tighten fall. I tighten fell then.
I can't get up.
I've tightened fallen. It's not funny.
It is funny.
Okay, we're gonna continue. That actually sounds like a really dumb meme. I can't believe I haven't seen before.
I've Mick fallen.
Is that a thing?
And he keeps it going, ladies and gentlemen.
You guys not seen I've Mick fallen? When you gotta pull it up on the screen.
You're new young Sergio.
Maybe later. Okay, so we're going to continue. We've created our incredibly bright sun here. Next up, we're going to create a more kind of interactive effect with some like kind of rainbow sparklies that are going to follow around behind a game object as we move it around our scene. So we're going to go through the same process we did before to create a new visual effect. Inside our hierarchy, we're going to right click and go down to visual effects and create a new visual effect down here.
We're making it a child of visual effect? Oh no.
No, just do it right this side. Actually, now that you mentioned, we probably should name these properly. I'm going to call this Sparklies, and I'll call the previous one Sun. Okay, so who remembers the next step? Once we've created the actual visual effect component, how do we get it rendering something? Yeah. So on the visual effect, beside the asset template, which currently has nothing plugged in, we can press the new button. Now that we've said that, one thing is if you're reusing an old template, like you've already created an explosion and you're just customizing a new one, you can also use the little picker button here to select an existing VFX and it'll load it in. So that also works, but we're creating something new. So I'm gonna hit the new button and I'm gonna save this inside my VFX folder again. And I'm gonna call this Sparklies. Okay, we get our standard wonderful particle system again.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is rather than have these just spawning over time, I want these to spawn over time, but also if I move this around, I want them to stay in place and trail behind the object as we move it. So getting the trail thing actually works pretty easily. All we have to do is switch one thing on the graph. So you'll notice when we look at everything below the spawn section, when we look at initialize and update and output, there's a big local up in the top right. What that does is tells the system that we're dealing in local space. So when we move the visual effect, all the particles move locally to it. So they basically move along. This is useful if you just need to drag something through space and not leave something behind. But if we're trying to create a trail effect, what I'm going to do is click on this local button, and it's going to switch it to world. Now, the problem with this is it's spawning everything in world space. So if we want to find our particles, if we go back to the 0, 0, 0 in our scene, that's where we're going to see our particles. To make sure they spawn at wherever our system is, we're going to have to tell it where we want the particles to start. So right now we are doing on our particles a set velocity random and a set lifetime random in our initialize particle section. We need to, in our initialization, also tell our particles where we're going to start. So similar to the sun that already had this plugged in, we're going to use something to spawn all of our particles on a sphere. So what I'm going to do to add a new segment to our initialize section, I'm going to click on initialize particle. And then I'm going to hit the space bar. And I'm going to look for position. So kind of like Blueprint or Shader Graph, it's going to find all the relative stuff that deals with position, but you're going to find we have a ton of stuff in here. So searching, if you know exactly what you're looking for, can be useful. I find the search to be a little bit overwhelming sometimes when I'm just trying to find out how to position something and it shows me like 100 different options. So we can also just go through the actual setup here. We can go in and look at something like attribute. Let's see this. Where even is that? Yeah, I think we go to attribute. Then we can go down to position. Composition, is that it? Set. Wow, we have to go really deep. Yeah, these menus are fantastic. It's definitely got a pretty steep learning curve finding all this stuff. So if we go from the very start, we can go into attribute, position, composition, set, and then we find all the different options here. We can also just hit space and look for set position, and we get a much nicer list of the stuff we're looking for, provided I can spell position properly. The one we're looking for, we can see a lot of different options here, but if we look for set position sphere, we can find this one, the set position shape arc sphere. So that can position particles on a sphere around basically any given point. So we're going to add that block. Now you notice it's spawning them on a sphere, but it's doing them still at the origin of our scene, which we don't want. We want the particles to spawn around our game object. So this is where that whole world local thing gets a little bit weird, but we can use world and local in different places. So while we have our particle system globally set to world, we can tell our particle system when we use this set position node to treat it locally. So what I'm going to do on the set position node, you can see it says arc sphere W. If I click on that, I can go to local. And now the particles spawn around my actual game object. So we're saying simulate everything in world space, but spawn our particles locally to where our position is. We go and select our visual effect over in the hierarchy here and drag it around, we can actually see the trail effect working. But what I want to do is create sort of like a constant rate of particles coming out. And when I start moving it, I want them to spawn faster so we create like a nice dense cloud. You'll notice one of the issues with this, if I move really slowly, it looks pretty dense. That's not bad. But if I start whipping this thing around, doing this, we don't end up with much of a trail. It just seems like they're spawned kind of randomly. I want it to be a lot more consistent than that. So let's go up to the top and take a look at different spawning modes. So right now we have it set to constant spawn rate. You can also do things like bursts or periodic bursts. So every like 1 second you can release 5. What we're going to do is we're going to use a spawn over distance traveled setup. So as we move through space, doesn't matter how fast we're moving or what time, it's going in between update steps. It's just every time we move a certain amount of distance, it's going to spawn more particles. So I'm going to click the spawn section and hit space and look for spawn over distance. So I'm going to add this spawn over distance node. Now, it's not going to work out of the box. We go and start trying to spawn over distance, nothing else changes. The reason for that is it needs to have this position node plugged in. And I'm still not entirely sure why, but Unity has a special node to plug into this that has the goofiest name ever. Most of the time I forget what it is. I think I actually have it in my mind right now, but normally I have to Google it and look up how to use this node. But I think we're going to go to the left-hand side, and instead of adding a block to our graph here, we're going to go to the left-hand side and hit space, and we can actually add, kind of like shader graph, we can add other mathematical nodes to the left and plug them in. So I'm going to go to the left and hit space and look for change space. I got to be honest, I have no idea why it's called this. They call it the change space node. And that change space node is going to get plugged into the position. So 1 second, I did it wrong. Yep, there we go. So we might have to adjust something else, but yeah, I think we'll need to turn it up a bit. But if we have it set to change space plugged in, try cranking this up.
To get an object or something?
You can, yes, I'll show you how to do that later. I've got my rate per unit cranked up to like 100 right now, but remember, one thing that's limiting our particle system, you remember we played around with that capacity value before? Right now it's set at 32, so even if we're spawning a lot, we get capped at 32 particles. So just for purposes now, I'm going to crank my capacity up to 1024. Then I'll try dragging my particle system around. Ah, there we go. All right, my rate is a little bit high. Another thing I did is since the default space here, this target space is set to this local value, basically means I'm comparing my local position to my local position every frame, which is always going to be 0. We want to make sure our change space, the target space, is also set to world. And that'll allow it to properly feed in by changing position. And then it can calculate how many particles I'm going to spawn every frame. And I'll send a snapshot of this setup really quick just to Discord if anyone needs to reference it. That's how we get a trail system. And someone had asked if we can get a reference to an object, and you can. So if we needed this trail to follow something else, for instance, we could do that. We'll do that later. It gets a little bit complex, but the VFX system has something called a property binder, where you can basically send different arbitrary data from our gameplay into VFX. So you can send things like transform data for position and rotation and scale. You can send like velocity. You can even do cool stuff, like there are binders for things like the terrain system to get like terrain positions. You can spawn things in the world. There's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do. And I've done a little bit in the past. They actually have examples, so you can go in and create your own binders if you need to send whatever weird arbitrary data you need to send to the visual effect graph. Good example would be, we were talking about the sound stuff earlier. You could probably send like the frequencies of a track that's playing into VFX so it can react to it. So as I drag this around, I get my little standard VFX particles kind of trailing behind, but I think we can probably make this look a lot nicer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to initialize, and instead of using the set velocity random, I'm going to delete it, and I just want to add some noise, some turbulence, kind of like the sun, to move these around. So if we want to remove one of these blocks, I'm going to click on set velocity random and hit delete. If you ever want to just turn something off temporarily, remember you can hit the checkbox to turn things on and off as well. But I'm just going to delete that set velocity random because we don't need it at all. What I'm going to add to get them moving, because right now they're a little bit boring, they're just sort of popping in and out. On the update particle section, I'm going to hit space and I'm going to add turbulence, which is the exact same node that the sun was using. Now the turbulence will affect the particles as they spawn out, and it'll keep affecting them as we move our object away. And scrolling down a little bit more, we can make our particles output a little bit nicer. So right now it's set to this output particle quad. There's a few different ways we can output particles. You can output lines or meshes or trails or kind of whatever you want. We'll leave it set to quads, but I want to replace the main texture we're using right now. Right now it's using this default particle. I'm going to change the default particle over to the same sparkle one that the sun is using, because it's pretty good for any sort of like small kind of trailing particle. So I'm going to, on the output particle quad, I'm going to go to the main texture and click on the little picker button here. Oops. Oh, so I'm going to look for, I believe it's called sparkle, but if we search for it, we're probably not going to find anything. So that sparkle texture is actually in the package that's part of Visual Effect Graph rather than in our project. If we want to see more options for stuff that's actually part of our project but might be hidden, if we click on these three little dots here, we can turn on this Show Package Results. There we go. We'll find the sparkle.tga. So again, to turn that on, to make sure we can find all the textures in our project, we're going to click on the three little dots right here and turn on Show Package Results. And I'll clip that into Discord. Why does it look like miniature ghosts? So two reasons for that. It's not orienting correctly. We want it to aim in the direction it's traveling, like the sun does. We also want to crank up the brightness on it, and the scale isn't quite right either. So what I'm going to do on the orient face camera plane, instead of face camera plane, I'm going to click this drop down and change it to along velocity. Now they're going to aim in the direction they're traveling. I also want them to be thinner and look more like that sparkle. So we can add whatever nodes we need to kind of get us there. So what I'm going to do on the output particle quad, I'm going to select the whole block and hit space. And I'm going to look for multiply scale. And we can scale in different directions here. So X is going to make it wider or thinner. Y is going to make it longer. You notice if you make them really long, the whole orient along velocity starts to look real weird. Now, a couple other things that look weird about them is they actually get bigger over time, which for little sparkles we have like this, we probably don't want. And our color is also way off. So we can see here it's using a color over life. If we click on it, we can see it starts off, there's transparency, so it sort of fades in. It gets white, and then it fades out at the end. There's a couple different ways of messing with the color here. We can either adjust that gradient to choose whatever color it's going to be, or one trick that I like to do is I'm going to leave it set on the set color over life. So I know I have this nice gradient from basically transparent to white and back to transparent again. So I'm just going to multiply on top of that. So I'm going to add to our output node, multiply color. Then we can put in whatever color we want here. Now remember, the visual effects system uses HDR, so we can basically add bloom. So if we start increasing the values past 1, we can start to add a nice glow to our particles.
X, Y, Z.
Red, green, blue. So X,
Y, Z is red.
red, green, blue.
Why
Yeah.
don't they just put RGB?
There's a lot of places you'll find that in both Unity and Unreal where they use RGB and A basically interchangeably with X, Y, Z, W.
W?
Yeah, W is alpha.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know how we ended up with like W for a vector. I think they had like planned vector 3 and we're like X, Y, Z, that makes sense. I think so. And then it was like, oh crap, we're gonna have a vector 4. What do we use? And they were like, W?
I mean, the results are cool.
Mm-hmm. Now, another cool thing I like to do, for our multiply color here, we have our multiply color just doing a single color. Another option we want to do, if we want to go RGB with it, is instead of doing the multiply color, we can do the much longer named multiply color from multiply color random from gradient. And I'll set this to just random color. And then if we go mess around with our gradient here, we can create our Razor RGB particles. Cool.
Party.
Now, one thing for like a trail system, if we were moving very far, very fast, it looks better, but I find the lifetime on these is way too long. So I think what I'm probably going to do is go back up to the lifetime and shorten it quite a bit. And try like half a second to 1 second on the set lifetime random. That looks a little bit more trail-like. Oh, right, sorry, I forgot. The one other thing I said we were going to adjust is the fact that they're getting bigger over time instead of smaller. So if we go to, in the output block, the set size over life, right now we can see this graph is going up. We can click on it and change it. To go down instead of up.
We only do this like by dragging it around. You know, like change the value.
You want to change the value directly, you can right click and go edit key. You want to make it kind of perfect?
I don't like that. I'm so used to Unreal. It's like that you can enter right there.
So if you double click anywhere on those graphs, you can add another keyframe. So I've done that to create an effect where it kind of goes up and then down.
Settings for the colors.
You were multiply color, so I even mine out. So this multiply color is white. If you left it at the original values, you might just be knocking out the red. Yeah. Oh, so that's one thing you can turn on and off. In the top right, if you click on the gizmos drop down, you can turn the selection outline on and off. I have to turn it off for VFX just because it doesn't look very nice. And if you want to go nuts, you can turn all the spawn values up. Go times 5.
Itchy. Well, that white powder Jeff's on us to look at. not paying attention to your Jeff's class. Really. This is so That's a stretch. It's crazy.
Cool.
Please don't, Sergio. Not.
Now, we're obviously dragging this around, but you could do whatever you wanted with this. You could parent it to like an animated bone. You could script it to move around or have it following a physics object, and all the same kind of behaviors with it trailing would work. Cool. Okay, I want to get started on our final effect because it's going to take a while. There's quite a bit inside of it. We're going to combine, we're going to do a fire effect, so we're going to have some flames, some smoke, some sparks, some screen distortion to kind of add it all together to get the effect we want. We're also going to do it on top of Chris's head. So I've got a 3D scan of Chris. We're going to bring that into our project and use that to spawn all of our fire effects.
Chris.
He did it upstairs.
Yeah, he did it at Beyond Capture.
Be upstairs.
Yeah. Yeah, Beyond Capture, they actually have a few spaces, but they share a lot of space with VFS, so they have one, like, capture space upstairs where they do smaller stuff with, like, all their radial cameras to capture a person. And then they've got larger sound stages over underneath the 151 building.
I'm curious, does this campus have a mocap studio or no?
Just Beyond Capture. We don't have one ourselves. Yeah.
Just mocap.
Mocap. We don't like have a official VFS mocap area. Okay, so let's start off with bringing our assets in. Let me just go and grab them really quick. Okay, so over on Discord, I'm going to drop a file called chrisheadmesh.7zip into your class channel. I'm going to get everyone to download that file. You actually don't have to unzip it.
Potential interesting.
Don't worry about it.
Little computer.
No, we're gonna play Bitch Boy.
Second, yes.
So we're going to download that file.
It's cursed.
And yeah, if you actually don't want to unzip it, if you have like a 7-zip file open, you can actually just grab the assets right from here and drag it into the Unity project.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It'll extract it and copy the files in.
Yeah, it says it's
Yeah. So we're going to drag Chris head clean and texture 1001 and texture 1002 in. Yeah, I just put that inside my VFX folder with everything else. I usually kind of, with my folder structure and stuff, like I've only got a few files here. Some people are kind of very hardline about their folders. They'll create like VFX, textures, models and stuff. And it's like, you've got like 5 files in 5 different folders. Like that's just frustrating to find stuff. It's all about usability. So until you get to the point where it's like hard to find things in here, I wouldn't really worry about creating a lot of different subfolders yet. So once we've imported them, you can click on the model. We'll have to apply some materials to it, but we can see the silhouette of Chris there.
So tiny too.
Yes, the scale, if we drag this into our scene, is probably very small. I don't know what scale they did here.
micro.
Yeah. Yeah, this box is 1 meter. If you want to scale it up, I'll show you a good trick. So one thing we don't want you doing with a lot of your assets, especially people working with artists, is the artists will like submit, they're like, yeah, this is my house, it's this big. And someone on the team will go, oh, I can fix that, I'll just scale it up. And then they export the next thing, and it's a desk that fits inside the original tiny house. So someone will go, okay, I'll just scale it up. It's better just to export this stuff properly. Or if we notice there's sort of like a uniform scale problem with a lot of different assets, instead of scaling it up in the scene, what I'm going to do is click on the asset itself and click on the model tab inside the import settings. It has this thing up top called the scale factor. We can increase it there. So click on the actual asset, the Chris Head Clean mesh, and click on the model tab here. Yeah. And increase the scale factor. I don't know how big we need its head to be. I'm going to go 20 and scroll down and hit apply. Wow, still kind of small.
Why does it look so weird?
I mean, partly Chris was making a goofy face when they scanned him.
Yeah,
It also decided he didn't need a big chunk of his head.
Oh my god. Wait, I don't see the model button.
You want the-
You're clicking on the imported asset here.
Oh, yeah.
How would you, when you said there's two methods, what's the other one? Export it properly?
Yeah, basically throw it back at your artist and say, hey, this is the wrong scale. Should have had your 6-foot man in the scene and exported everything properly, which is
Right.
the best way of doing it, yeah. And the artist should be okay with that, because the last thing you want as an artist is a programmer fixing all of your art for you. Because they're going to care about how it looks nearly as much as you should. Okay, so we've got Chris, probably gigantic now. His head is like over 1 meter high, but this will work. So we're going to go and throw some VFX on Chris. So in our previous VFX, we had spawned our particles on a just given shape, either from like a single point where our object is, or using a like arc sphere shape. We can also sample skin meshes or static meshes like this one and spawn particles based on that information as well. So we're going to go and create a new visual effect. And typically what I like to do, just to make this easy to work with, to make sure everything lines up correctly, is I'm going to right click on the Chris Head Clean and create the visual effect as a child of his head. So I'm going to right click and go down to visual effects again and create a new visual effect. And we'll call this visual effect Burning Man. So after we've created the visual effect game object, we'll have to create the asset itself. So I'll go click the new button and put that in my VFX folder again and call it Burning Man. If you ever need to rename any of this stuff after the fact, you totally can. It won't break anything. Okay, so what we'll start with, I think, is probably, we'll kind of work our way up. We'll do our little fire effect first, then we'll do some smoke, then we'll do some sparks, then we'll add some kind of like screen motion, so we get that really hot, like wavy air type look. We can add that in as well. So let's go to our spawn system here. We'll start with the original. Our velocity actually for fire might not be terrible. We'll see how things look. But the big thing is I want to spawn these along the mesh rather than just from the point we're sitting at right here. So just to start, actually, let's go and get rid of our set velocity random. And we're going to click our initialize and hit space to add another node to our block. We're going to look for sample, set position mesh. Now, you'll notice there's two different options here. there is a set position mesh and a set position skinned mesh. They work a little bit differently. Mesh is like a static mesh. That's like a prop that's not going to be moving. It's not rigged or animated. If you want to do this on an animated character, you have to use the skinned mesh option that will actually follow along with a character that's rigged and animated. Theoretically, yes, Chris is a character here, so he should be skinned, but this is just a static mesh, so we're going to use the set position mesh option. Now, the default setting is going to be a capsule. Instead of capsule, we're going to use the little selector button here. And I'm going to look for Chris. Wait, is it not called that? Artist. It's called textured mesh. That's descriptive. Thank you. All right, we're going to look for textured mesh. Oh, wow. It actually found it eventually because it's inside the FBX. Oh, that's kind of cool. But yeah, the actual file we're looking for is textured mesh. Oh, and I forgot something important. I do this literally every time. Usually end up banging my head against the wall trying to figure out why things aren't working. We can see even after selecting it, it's still spawning in here. We have to turn something on the asset itself to allow it to read all the positions it needs. Unity doesn't tell you this ahead of time. It doesn't give you an error if you're trying it on an asset that isn't ready. It just doesn't work, which is kind of frustrating. So what we need to do is we're going to go back to the actual asset again. And in the same model tab we were looking in before, we're going to go down to this read-write option. We're going to turn that on. So this counts if you're doing it as a static, like set position mesh, or a set position skin mesh. You need to do this for both. We're going to turn on read-write and allows it to actually read information from that asset.
Which object are you on?
Just click on the Chris head clean. This is the asset again. Yeah. And we'll hit apply, and suddenly it starts working. Like the two that are on his eyes perfectly. That was good. So that gets the particles spawning on the mesh. Now, a lot of the settings we have right now actually don't look too bad for fire, because we have it fading out over time. We have it getting bigger over time. We just really need to swap out the texture and make sure it plays properly, and it probably won't look too bad. Oh, IT is messaging me. Okay, cool. One thing you might want to play around with, depending on how your mesh is constructed. This one you'll notice has absolutely fantastic topology. Check this out. Beautiful. Yeah. 3D scan stuff is very, very heavy. So this one's actually not bad. Spawning on random vertices isn't really a big deal. Certain props or meshes, if you can imagine you have a table that has like very kind of long quads on it. If you're spawning on the vertices, you're going to get a lot of particles on like the corners of your object, which probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So you can change, instead of being placement mode vertex, you can switch to either edge, which again, with the table won't help you a lot, but you can switch it to surface. So that can give you more of like a uniform placement on the mesh. For our case, our mesh is so dense that all of three of these options are going to result in basically the same behavior. Okay, scrolling down, we're going to go and take a look at how we can play a proper flipbook here. Inside the samples that we brought in earlier, for fire things like the effect here, you can see how it's animated each particle. So they're playing that as a flipbook. So it's like a little animated sprite sheet of fire that it's looping through to create that effect. We go in and I can show it to you really quick. If we look in the textures folder inside there, you'll see these. We've got a few different options. I think we'll probably do that one. But we have a few different options for kind of how the fire is going to animate. And so imagine this just treating it like an old school, like 2D animations. We're flipping through different parts of a flipbook to animate. We can do that in Visual Effect Graph as well. So on the main texture, instead of this default particle, I'm going to use the select button and I'm going to look for, is it flame? Yeah, they're all called flame. The one I'm going to use, you can pick a different one if you want. You might just have to enter slightly different values, but I'm going to select the Flame 2 16:4. Perfect. That's exactly what we were going for. Yeah, that's exactly how fire works. Yeah. Very realistic. So the reason why it's doing this is we plugged in a flipbook. We're not telling it to animate like a flipbook does. So you'll notice up above where we've selected the texture, we have a few options for like color mapping, but the important thing is the UV mode. This is currently set to default. I'm going to change this. Instead of default, I'm going to go to flipbook. Now it's still going to look wrong because we need to adjust the flipbook size and then we need it to tell it to play. So the flipbook size, the artist that created these assets was actually very, very nice. We can see it says Flame 2 16:4. So for my flipbook size, I'm going to go 16 and 4. And we get that perfect looking fire. Yep. Sure. Yeah. We'll have to tune it a little bit, but the important part is getting it playing. So to get it playing properly, up above in Update, we're going to add in a flipbook player that's going to animate these for us. So I'll click on Update Particle and hit space to add our flipbook player. Now it looks a little bit better. Still not great, but we can go and fix some things after the fact. I didn't change anything down below. I'll just copy or take a snip of these settings here and put them on Discord. And it's 2:55. We'll take another break. And just while we're on break, I'm going to come around. And anyone that's having any issues, I'll help you catch up.
Stars you see intro to layer one, right click it, so you have to check. Stars you see it's just something. I mean, just change some settings on. Don't forget to do it.
Does anyone need a hand?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know if you think that it will work for characters if we want to be able to.
Yep. So for that, like I think a 2D sprite like this probably would know. What you could do is just instead of doing that's fine. Actually, just support as well from the body.
But like they're divided by the color ID.
The sprite looks good enough to do that. Otherwise, right now we're only doing these part of the it's actually output anything into the mesh. Separate property lit, they could drop them too. So you could do something like that.
I want to shoot myself. Just because I want to see how you look.
Oh, how did yeah.
or click more.
Sure, yeah, actually, good to see you, Mike.
Okay, I lost
Yeah, I'll be in my office shortly.
Yeah, it'll like take like 10 minutes. I just want to run like 20 games.
I do.
Everybody's
Sergio? Oh, you
It's Connor's fault.
Hola, chico. You can English? Bro, don't say that. Wait. Have some respect.
No, I love
I
Unity.
love you.
Okay, I don't like C# right now. It's
Yeah,
doing annoying things.
Is it?
Yay! So I might play it next week.
It doesn't launch on these computers for some reason.
Yeah,
So.
But I got it. And I also Katie.
Well, Katie's too. They're both such good games. Neither of them are. Though Celeste does actually have some Metroidvania-esque design, but it's a bug. No, because it doesn't have the ability to unlock, but it does have bad turning.
It's not a game.
Oh, I do too, but I still managed to beat it. It just takes practice.
I
I died over 3,000 times.
oh, okay, I think it was.
Let's put in some.
Honestly, the deaths don't really feel bad because it just feels like
Okay, I don't know why, but
Sky don't.
I actually don't like dying.
okay, where?
I don't know. I just want to, and I don't
I hate that.
Because I set my coordinates in the Discord server,
Yeah.
and then I got back this morning and there's just a little dirt hut there, and I'm like, that was you? You explored my cave?
Not really.
I just saw some torches in there, but I had no idea the place. That's fine if you do. I just
finally
I wanted to know why there was just a dirt hut there.
I
Are you like setting up shop there?
Yes.
I just put it there for no reason.
Fair enough.
No.
Yeah.
I logged out.
Yeah.
I like.
Montó caballo. Y me dijo muy difícil mover.
Me when Connor. What happened? Why did he lose his eyes?
Yeah. He all does.
Okay, why did it? Why did
Yeah,
it?
but I thought that he keeps
I skip fast. Ah, tu estava aqui.
Yo, he gets his zombie.
You ready for Spencer?
Did you say spawn point?
Yeah, he's right there.
Yeah, I died after game.
Talk to me.
Okay.
Why are you hiding?
Why
Why are you hiding?
If I imported the rest, if I exported the mesh, right? Exported the little mesh from said I didn't want to triangulate it. Stupid program.
Wait.
Stupid program.
Some words, right?
Without triangulation.
Dude, yeah. I got
You wouldn't want.
Oh,
Slurp?
I had everything on me. Bro, you can see.
Wait, what did you lose, Sergio?
I all have. I forgot to.
Did that try and disconnect?
Well,
That's why I just did.
no, I was just wondering why reason you see that it showed only my interface, my tier 5. Yeah.
Buster.
Yeah.
Buster. So.
You're working on that for a long time.
Let him overwork.
Is this for your team project?
It's just for me to get practice for it.
Oh, I can hit you. We're supposed to color fight.
They go hand in hand.
Not on brand.
Now, fake, exposed. I'm actually the armor slash sword prodigy and Forces slash sword.
It's like learning about fucking bulletproof vests, but you don't learn about the
Shit.
We should make it bullets, not the best.
Damn. True.
Why does it make you look like a hacker?
I
don't know playing anymore.
watching the cards
Why do people play with everything on? It's so bad.
because I don't know how to do with the cards. I don't know if that's possible.
Yes.
It is?
He said what?
That's the coordinates.
I think it's something the server
there's a delay.
enable or something because I simply use it.
Leave the line.
No, I know. So it's whenever you remote
Brand
He's talking to Steven.
pretty busy.
No, what's up?
I had a question, just general Unity question. I'm wondering
Yeah.
if you'd be able to help us.
Sure.
I mean, this is it's not unrelated, but trying to make a strategy.
Yeah, and then it comes to
Right now, I have
Yes.
So I have this code on the tiles itself. The text. If it's been hit, but I don't know how to use it. We use not.
Yeah. Normally what I do for systems like this is I'll do a recast system. Basically cache the parts.
why is your chair so low?
It's something new.
You like
Right?
Okay.
I just had it with 7 months old.
If it's cast,
Yeah.
it's not.
There is a reading. You could, it's
There is a function. Actually, no. Okay, so yes, we look at that.
Yeah, because I don't have my
Connor, can you change this chair for that one? Look at the size of this slab. Absolute unity.
Connor, you know the spawn timer?
5 minutes.
5 minutes from when the
We have fingerprint.
So when you get close enough, 5. Yeah, I think I've been close enough. I just can't find the cave right now.
That's what
That's it.
I say.
Sorry, you're not right. Okay, I'm sorry that
Connor.
you're
Connor. Connor.
So the part of this room is more than just a sword. It's awesome. It's pretty good.
No, I just don't have a fucking
File export.
Oh yeah, but like I did that and then when I imported it, this.
Look at this. What the hell? What is this purple?
And there's the color ID.
Hey, that's I can lend you.
Who the hell is talking to me from mainland, bro? What? Talk to me now.
I like this.
Next Texas.
You know what's funny though?
Is there another place?
That Berserk is place.
Okay. I was right.
Is that a Berserk reference?
Yay.
Not
Who is
really.
that?
Probably between
So I'm like, I'm thinking program
people.
Oh, that's programming.
No, but still fish. Like what we have away. Oh, how's That's a walking too long. Yeah. Do I look like I walked 2 kilometers a day?
Yo!
Like 500 meters from here's the
All right, we're gonna get started again. Do you have an entire cake behind your monitor?
yes.
Oh,
Are we getting started again?
Yeah, we're getting started.
Is it actually your birthday?
No, that's the day. It wasn't Sunday.
Happy birthday, Rafa.
I trust your. So you gotta do that sound. Some of your friends did the Lego building.
No mistake.
Okay, everyone back in your seats, please. We're going to get started.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think. Yeah, I only have spirit. I think I'm just why.
Okay. All right, so our next steps, we're going to improve our fire a little bit because it's not looking fantastic. So there are a few issues here. First off, it's stretched more than it should be. Our fire is supposed to look a little bit more like a kind of singular little bit going up. So we're going to stretch it out a little bit. We're also going to change the color a little bit so it kind of has some emission and glows more. We can also deal with some of the weird, you can see going through the nose there, there's some weird sorting issues that are popping up. So we can kind of tackle all of these. We can also work on the fact that it looks like they're moving down. They're actually not moving at all. Does anyone know why it looks like they're moving downward? It's not gravity. They're actually not moving. It's because of their pivot. So the pivot's in the center of the sprite. Since we have it set up to grow as it gets bigger, it's expanding up and down, and it looks like it's moving. So there's actually a fix for this that's pretty easy. On the output particle quad, I'm going to add a new little block here called set pivot. So 0, 0, 0 is the center. I'm going to go and put in 0 minus 0.5, 0. So the pivot is normalized with 0 being in the center. If you go up 50%, like y at 0.5, you're up at the top. If you go down 50% on y minus 0.5, you go down to the bottom. Now they're kind of better centered the way we would expect them to be. There are some other options we can turn on here. So you'll notice how we have all these weird clipping issues with the fire kind of going through the head, which looks odd. There's something game engines can do called soft particles. They basically look at the depth of geometry nearby, and they change the alpha of the particle based on that depth. So they're still kind of clipping through the object, but they're using alpha to kind of remove those parts. So up near the top of this output particle quad, I'm going to turn on this option for use soft particle. Now, overall, the alpha is going to be a lot lower, and we're probably also going to have to fade or adjust our soft particle fade distance here. Right now, it's set to 1. So if anything's within 1 meter, it starts to fade it out. I'm going to start to drop it down more. Bring our fire back and get a value that looks more normal. I love the fire inside the mouth. I'll try like 0.2 for the soft particle fade distance. So I turned on the use soft particle right here.
Okay.
And then I changed the soft particle fade distance to 0.2. Yep. Now our alpha is obviously a lot faded out. We probably want to bring that back a bit. There's a couple different things we can do. We can adjust the alpha. We can also just play around with the color. Let's go and add another node called multiply color, the same one we used before. I'm going to give it some emission. Actually, not too bad. I'm gonna do a quick experiment. Set size. No, that looks weird. I feel like they're popping up and fading very quickly. I think the flame should probably last longer. So I'm actually liking the way this is looking. But I'm going to go up to our initialized particle. And instead of saying the flames are going to last from 1 to 3 seconds, I'm going to go from 3 to 5 and see how that looks. And also, if we want more flames, we can turn it up. I'm going to go maybe constant spawn rate of like 30.
250.
250.
No, 250.
Oh, do 50.
No, 250 though.
Yeah, we gotta
250.
do 250.
All right, 250, and we'll relay, increase our capacity up to like 2048. Let's see how that looks.
Bro.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, actual good.
Okay, so we know our target's probably going to be somewhere between 16 and 250. Let's try 50 again. That's pretty good. I like 50. Now, we're doing this on the entire mesh. There's some really cool stuff you can do. If you wanted to, you could even do something like, the character, has anyone played Dota 2? What's the lightning character? Razor. So a character like Razor in Dota 2 has like very specific kind of exposed lightning skin areas. You could have your artist paint out a map where you want lightning to spawn on the character and increase it in those areas.
What do you mean by paint out that?
So in something like Substance, you could actually paint like a black and white map to tell the particle system where it wants lightning. Basically making up your own map. You'd export an extra one. Yeah. Yeah. Dota 2 actually, if you want to really get into shaders, they have a pretty good doc. Since they allow people to make their own skins, they have their own... I'm going to find it really quick. They have a shader mask guide where they actually do stuff like this. So these are all the different masks they create for Dota 2 characters. They're pretty complex. I think they actually show one for Razor, in fact. Oh yeah, here we go. So you can see his arm and stuff is here. They actually create this black and white mask that masks off where they put the animated lightning on the character. So you could use that same mask for like lightning VFX.
Oh.
Yeah. If you even want to play with this stuff, you can... they actually allow you to download these assets to use as like a starting point for like skins and stuff. So you can find all these textures. Yeah. So they use masks in a lot of different areas. This character, same thing. They have sort of like a glow mask for like the glow underneath the rocks. They use the same technique. Okay. So we've got our fire looking pretty good. Let's go and add some smoke as well. So one thing we can do in VFX Graph that I mentioned earlier is we can create a second setup inside our existing graph. And we can even get away with copying and pasting a lot of it and kind of reusing it. Since smoke is going to behave very, very similar, we're going to spawn a bunch of smoke particles. The really big difference is they're going to have some gravity that's going to move them up in the air. But that's really it. So what I'm going to do to speed things up a little bit is I'm going to zoom out and grab this whole thing. And I'm going to hit Control C. And then I'm going to hit Control V to paste it. And I'll put it right by side by side. Now, we'll have to make some other changes, but the big thing here, I'm going to go in on the second one. And the main texture, we have a bunch of different options for smoke. So the main texture, I've got them two side by side right now. The main texture option on the second one, I'm going to look for smoke. Oh, not flame smoke, just smoke. There's candle smoke. I think we want to go with wispy smoke. Let me actually just look at these really quick. Oh, beautiful. That's exactly what I'm going for.
Which one is this one?
I'm just changing the texture out. We're going to go with, oh, you know what? Actually, this smoke looks kind of weird. I'm going to go with maybe the cloud? Maybe wispy smoke. That might work. Sure, let's try wispy smoke 3 8x8. Yeah, wispy smoke 3B 8x8. And yeah, things are going a little bit crazy. So remember on the other one, our flip book is 16x4. This one's 8x8. So I'm going to change the flipbook size to 8x8. That's looking a little bit better. The color's not exactly what we want. Kind of looks like the vibe I'm getting right now. So what we'll do to get this a little bit more smoke looking, we obviously need this to be kind of like black, like burning smoke. You push it too much towards the white side of things and it starts looking more like steam. So we can go down and we can play around with the color. So we'll go to our multiply color. And 1 by 1 by 1, we lower it down, it basically disappears. I think the default color here is kind of dark. What we'll do to kind of bring it back and make it more visible is I'm going to add in a multiply alpha. And we're going to turn that up. Maybe that's too much. Ooh, that actually isn't bad. So what I've done here on my multiply color, I've brought this down to like a gray to make it darker. You can kind of tune that however you want. And then my multiply alpha, I've got it 2 to make it more visible. Now, one of the big things between the fire and smoke is we probably want the smoke to be a lot bigger and fewer to create sort of these large wispy areas. Right now, our smoke is very detailed, which smoke normally isn't. So we have a set size over life already. I'm going to go and kind of piggyback off of that. I'm going to add a multiply size. We bring it up to 2, that looks a little bit better. That's actually a really good sprite sheet. That looks really cool. Now, one of the problems with our smoke right now is, remember we had moved our pivot down for our fire, which is creating some weird movement with our smoke because its pivot is actually in the center. As opposed to the fire, which we want to be stationary and pivoted at the bottom, our smoke, we want the pivot in the center. We actually want to move it up with gravity as it kind of flows away. So the set pivot block that we added earlier, I'm going to delete that one. Then I'm going to go up and we're going to make a couple changes here. The big thing is we're going to add gravity. So I'm going to go to my update particle and add a new block for gravity. So by default, it's going to have normal Earth gravity, which is going to look real weird. I want a very small amount of like upward gravity. So I'm going to change this to maybe like 1. Oh, even that's too high. 0.5?
4 or 5.
You know what? 0.1 isn't bad.
Good.
Yeah.
Mine sort of looks like it's like generating them in the air almost.
Generating them in the air?
Well, maybe it's because I changed the lifetime.
Oh, shouldn't still look like that. Let me see.
This. Oh wait, yeah, it was my lifetime. So I had it set from 3 to 10.
Mhm.
So it was just causing it to stay alive.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Another thing that stands out is a little bit weird that we can adjust in the update section here is the the smoke animation is very fast right now. You'd expect it to be a little bit slower. So in the flipbook player, I'm going to lower the frame rate to like maybe half of what it currently is. Looks a bit better. Oh, and one other thing is even though they're spawning at different times and have different lifetimes, you'll still see some of the same patterns side by side, which makes it kind of stand out, makes it look more kind of repetitive. With our fire, it has sort of a specific orientation, so we can't really do this. But on our smoke, we can add some rotations, so they all spawn at different rotations, and it's going to make them look quite a bit different. So on our output, I'm going to add a set angle block. Oh, sorry, not set angle. We're going to do set angle random uniform. Now, depending on which one we add, if we do like the X rotation, it's going to do some weird stuff. The one we're looking for is we want to adjust the Y rotation. Wait, nope, sorry, I'm wrong. Z. There we go. I'm going to set it up so my random rotation on Z is going to go between 0 and 360. That way, when they spawn, they're essentially going to spawn rotated around in the direction we're looking. Now they look a lot less uniform. And finally, I'm going to go up to the very top and just lower its rate a little bit. 50 is pretty high. Oh, that looks pretty good. I think like 15 to 20 is probably going to look good. That smoke actually looks really cool. So for reference, I was mentioning the Houdini and Emberjet and stuff before. These sprite sheets come out of applications like that. Complex ones can even do really weird stuff. Like you'll notice some of these actually have things like normal maps applied. You can have lighting affect the 2D particles as the lights move around. Unity has one example. I haven't played with it much yet, but they have something they call, I think it's like 6-way lighting. See if I can find it really quick. Oh yeah, here we go. So to get like fully kind of volumetric looking lighting on smoke, they export different lighting conditions on a single VFX. And even though it's running in like 2D, it's basically just a sprite. They can change the lighting on the effect. So these are sprites. Yeah, it's really cool. The one thing is it's sort of a good faked effect. It's not volumetric, so if you stick your camera through it, it's still a card. But from a distance, if it's something the player can't like walk through, it looks really, really good. So you can see here, they'll change the light source around. And this is just a 2D card with some tricks applied to it. But yeah, they're doing the same thing with the clouds here. Oh, I guess this one's using the same effect. And yeah, their tutorial for this starts in Houdini.
Also, right now our fire doesn't give off any glow to the surroundings.
No, that's a good question. So if you want to add in an effect of the fire kind of illuminating the surroundings, you have to add a light for that. There's a few different ways of doing it. VFX Graph actually has some ways of outputting information to lights to control them. But a lot of the time, what I usually do for something like this is I'll add a light source to like the fire particle itself. And either through code or just with an animation, I'll modulate it to make it look like it's kind of like flickering to create that sort of torch effect. Yeah, VFX and basically any engine out of the box won't actually illuminate anything. They can like have emissions so it glows, but it won't actually light the surrounding environment. Okay, so another thing that we're missing here is some kind of sparks that are going to go all wispy up in the air away from the character. So I think I want to add in that next. Let's go, and we probably don't need... We'll have to make a lot of changes to it. But let's take our original system again, and I'm going to copy and paste it. So I'm just copying the original fire section. And I'll paste this in, and this is going to have some of the same stuff that we did with our original Sparklies effect. So for our spawn rates, let's leave it at 50 for now. Going down a little bit further, sparks aren't going to last all that long. So for their lifetime, I'm going to go between 0.5 and 1. We'll do the same set position mesh. On our update particle, we're not going to need the flipbook player, so we can just delete that. But I'm going to add in gravity again. And I want to create that effect of the spark sort of moving up and like waving around in like the hot air currents above the character. So in addition to gravity, I'm going to add in that same turbulence node we were using before. Okay, everyone good so far? Down in our output particle quad, this is going to be a little bit more simple. We removed our flipbook stuff, so we actually don't need to do any animation on the sparks. I'm going to change the UV mode back to what the default is. So instead of flipbook, I'm just going to use the default UV mode again. Yeah, perfect. And instead of the Flame 02, we don't need a flipbook anymore. I'm going to change this back to the sparkle texture. Okay, so for our orient, remember, instead of face camera plane, we probably want these to kind of turn as they move. So I'm going to change them to a long velocity for the orientation. Our set size over life, I want to do what we did with our sparkles before. We'll probably start off kind of small. We'll have them grow and then shrink again. I believe if we actually delete our set size over life node and then add a new one, you'll probably have what I'm looking for. Yes. So the default setting for set size over life will have it grow and then shrink over time. Now, for our pivot, you can see it's still using that minus 0.5. You'll notice a weird effect where as they move up and die, it looks like they're shrinking back again. If we actually want to have it kind of follow the velocity perfectly, let's try moving the pivot up instead. So I'm going to change the pivot instead of minus 0.5. I'm going to set it to 0.5. That gets them turning a little bit better. And we can give them some sort of bright kind of glowy color. Right now they're just white. We probably want a orangey red type color. Maybe more yellow. I think we have their lifetime way too low right now, so we can go fix that after. Actually, no, let's do that right now because I can barely see them. If we go back up to our top, I definitely overcompensated here. For our set lifetime random, I'm going to go to like 2 to 3 and see how that looks. All right, they're a little big. Maybe 1.5 to 2.5 duration. Actually, that's not bad. Now, obviously, our size is a bit of a problem. So I want to shrink them horizontally, make them thinner, make them look more like spike or sparks. So I'm going to add in that same multiply scale. That looks a lot better. So for my multiply scale, I did 0.05 for X and 0.5 for Y. Okay, so we've got our fire and our smoke layered together. We've got some sparks on top. Looking not half bad. We won't have enough time for it today, but you could add some in some other effects if you're really trying to sell the burning effect. You could go and create a custom shader for your character that can add like burning bits on the actual material with sort of like a slider that you can sort of like increase to like have more and more burning on the character. I don't know if I can find it. There was one game I was playing recently that had an awesome fire effect. See if we can find it really quick. Might not be able to find good footage of it. That's too bad. But this game called RoboQuest I've been playing, they have a flamethrower effect that's really cool. When you hit an enemy with it, they actually turn the enemy black. So you just see their like black silhouette in the flames, and it gives that really cool, like kind of cinematic burning character look. Find it real quick. Oh, the only video I can find of the flamethrower, they're not shooting anyone with it. That's too bad. Okay, maybe I can dig it up later. Sorry, the witch? Oh, that's interesting. So they're kind of like spinning as they go up? Yeah, yeah. That is a good question. So turbulence will be kind of random. I wonder. We could definitely do like a vector field, but we'd have to create a vector field. You can add any sort of force you want. You can see it basically moving in a single direction. We'd have to figure out either based on lifetime or position what force we want to add to it to create kind of a spiral. I'm going to think on that and get back to you, see if I can find a quick way of doing it. I can't think of anything really easy off the top of my head without doing a ton of math. But yes, you definitely could add something like that. The next big thing I want to add before we wrap up is that kind of like wavy hot air effect. We can add that on top. So I'm going to again grab our original version, copy the entire thing, and paste it to the right. We're going to go down to the very bottom. I just want to double check I'm doing this right. Yes. We're going to go down to the very bottom, and the entire output particle quad part, I'm going to click on it and hit delete. So for now, it's going to update nothing, or output nothing. We got a lifetime there. That'll work. For the update particle, I'm going to delete the flipbook as well because we don't need that. So we haven't played with any of the other output types yet, but we can output tons of different things. You can even do stuff like output a lit mesh. You could actually just do weird stuff like this.
Oh, yeah.
With the compiled, you can have like meshes with textures on them moving through space. So you can use that for things like that explosion we looked at from the Unity demo. They had like rubble. You can do like lit meshes for rubble and things like that. What we're going to do today instead of a lit mesh is we're going to output a distortion quad. So we're going to drag off of the update and select the output particle HDRP distortion quad. Now, we probably won't see a whole lot here. We have to plug some stuff in first. You notice it actually has a default distortion blur map in. It looks like this. This really weird kind of tie-dye image. So it uses this to determine how it's going to distort the image underneath this new particle we're creating. So each color kind of represents a different direction it's going to be pushing and pulling to move the image around. It's actually under the hood. It's a lot like remember the like kind of weird beer goggles, drunk vision shader we created? Operates kind of like that, except on like a little per quad basis. So we can spawn all those quads over top of our burning image. So we've got our distortion blur map. We've got our distortion scale, which is going to help, which is kind of how busy it is. And also a blur scale if we want to blur the image underneath. To get this visible, we're going to need to add a few things that we have sort of standard. We're going to have to add in an orient, and we'll go orient face camera plane. And we can do a set size over life. Now they should be visible, but one weird thing I noticed with this is the distortion often isn't visible until we really start to crank up the alpha value, basically increase its transparency. So I'm going to add in a multiply alpha. And I'm going to start to turn this up. We should hopefully see some distortion. Yes. We got it cranked up quite a bit. We start to see that weird effect. If I turn that up to 30, we'll start to see it. If we go and increase its size by multiplying the scale, we start to get that. Now, these are way too big. Maybe double its size. And we probably want the heat haze to kind of move up as well. So like our other particles, on the update section, I'm going to add in gravity.
If you make the multiple alpha to 2,500, you get like a paper.
Oh, really?
It's actually
2,500?
it's almost like burning paper.
Oh, yeah, that's so weird. So the higher we make the gravity, the more insane it's going to look. Try like 0.25. And so it's not you might notice it like popping in and out up at the top. We want it to fade a little bit nicer. So I'll also add in a set color over life from the gradient, just like the others. I don't really care about the color here, but that's tuning its alpha over life, so it kind of fades in and out. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that these are all basically executed from the top down in a linear fashion. So if I do for instance, multiply alpha and then a set color that includes setting the alpha, that's going to overwrite it. So I want to make sure I do my set before my multiply. So I'm going to drag my set color over life up before my multiply happens. And then I'll see the effect come back again. And it's probably turned up a little too much still. Maybe 10. Cool. Well, there's our effect. So we could go in and swap out the mesh we're using here for any other mesh to basically just instantly light stuff on fire. As I mentioned, you could add more to this by adding a new material that creates sort of like a burning effect that animates on the character as well, depending on what you need this to look like. Could be characters burning up or maybe just actual materials disappearing. Some games will do like transitions for things where they might play this burning effect on an object and then like have it carve out with some noise so you see it like disappear. A lot of games have creative ways of going in and removing objects from the scene or like cleaning up dead bodies and stuff. Once you start to spot these things, they become kind of repetitive in games. You'll notice them a lot. My classic example is the remember in God of War, the weird like tentacle bits you have to throw your axe at and they break and dissolve away.
Yeah.
What are those called? You can find out really quick. I think I might have found it. Oh yeah, all this stuff. So I love this effect because it looks just like they barely tuned it after setting it up. You'll see how this dissolves. If you can figure it out. Here we go. You'll watch these things dissolve. Okay, there we go. It's pretty quick. If you look at the pattern, they applied like a pretty simple noise effect to it. So they're basically using noise and just subtracting over time to create that effect. That's how they do that dissolve. And you can see them use that in a lot of different places in the game. They also have a very consistent kind kind of distortion effect I've noticed in God of War, where it doesn't matter if it's like fire or magic or some other type of effect, if they have some sort of distortion, it seems to be reading from the same like distortion buffer, so it always kind of looks the same, which is interesting. Probably mostly a performance thing. But the more you kind of dig into shaders and VFX and kind of learn how to make them, the more you can kind of pick things apart and figure out how they did stuff. Stuff like this, actually, where the little vines regrow. I've actually seen teams also use Houdini for that. So you can actually procedurally generate things in Houdini and then export them in a fashion that allows you to use that stuff in engine and replay it. It's really powerful software, but I haven't dug into it a whole lot yet. Okay, so we'll wrap things up for today. Before we completely finish, I want to make sure we commit our changes over in Git. Here, let me start from the beginning again. We'll go open up fork.
Playable the whole time.
Oh no. Okay. So in VFX graph, that's not as big of a deal.
Oh.
So your graph will still be saved. Just you'll need to plug in the asset again. So the only thing it probably undid was unplugging this. So go select again and look for your Burning Man VFX and you should get it back. Yeah. Oh, you did all of that in play mode.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you just upload the...
Yeah, you can grab my branch if you want. I'll come by in a second. We'll see if we can recover it. If you find yourself doing that a lot, remember if you go to Edit and Preferences in Unity, you can actually go to the colors and you can change your play mode tint. Where is that?
Yeah, it's
Am I blind? Oh, here we go. Play mode tint. So I've seen some students that like keep doing that and burning themselves. They'll do this. Yeah, it's really hard to read, but you're not going to forget that you're in play mode.
Make it the fuchsia color.
Okay, so over in Fork, you'll actually notice there's a lot of stuff that's been added. Since we brought in those samples, they have a whole bunch of small nodes and stuff that come with it. That's okay, we'll commit all of it. So in Fork, up at the top of our unstaged section, I'm going to click on the Stage All button. Then we can type in our commit message and I'll say added VFX samples and playground scene for testing.
Yeah,
We covered everything.
Nice. So once we've staged everything, we've added our commit message here. We can go click the commit button. Should be around 250-ish files. And then we can go push to make sure everything's updated on GitHub. Yeah, push over here in the top left. Yeah.
Does Forge still do the Forge still does all the process if you close it during the push? Or when it break it?
So what it does is it launches a Git executable in the background, so it should still finish, but I wouldn't do that repeatedly.
Oh, you know, I was just curious in case like just like a fork crashed somehow or like
Yeah.
power went out.
Yeah. I mean, normally as long as things are committed, even if like something wrong happens with the push, you can just try it again.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll wrap things up for today. I'll come around just to make sure everyone's all caught up and they got their stuff backed up. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Yeah.